Every short film is unique. However, there are certain traits which are seen throughout all short films, one of which is that the duration is short. The duration is typically between 1 minute and up to 40 minutes. That is the time constraints Virgin Media Shorts allows for their short film competition. The reason for a short duration is so that the independent producers such as myself can easily create a piece of work which is not as time consuming or as expensive as a feature-length film such as Star Wars, which costs an incredible amount to produce. Typically, this leads to the storyline having a basic plot which does not go into too much depth due to the time constraints, whilst also allowing the audience to be easily immersed into the film. An example of this convention is the short film Black Hole, which is easily comprehensible for audience members. Typically within short films there are few characters featuring in the story. This is to adhere with the small budget which most short film productions have. It also keeps the storyline simple for the audience, as there is much less to process within the short time. The genre of my short film is where the film begins to diversify from other short films. For my short film I chose two different genres to form a hybrid genre. These two were sci-fi and action. Just like short films, there are certain conventions for specific genres. Action films typically feature a plot based around a protagonist being pursued by an evil antagonist, with the protagonist typically being aesthetically pleasing to ensure that we support the character, with the antagonist being the opposite side of the spectrum with a more aggressive, rough-looking face. An example of where this is seen is in the James Bond franchise, where we see a well-toned James Bond come up against villains such as the less-toned Goldfinger. Also featured in the storyline is the constant usage of chase scenes, the purpose being to put the audience on the edge of their seat for a breath of moment as they question the outcome. This can also be seen in Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, where we see Tom Cruise being pursued by a group of henchmen on motorcycles. This is also in conjunction with the plot being fast-paced to ensure that the audience do not feel bored at any moment of the film. The majority of action plots follow the idea of a happy ending for the main protagonist who either escapes or defeats the pursuing villain. There is also certain props which would feature within action films, one of which would be the use of weaponry such as guns, which adds to the already formed violence within the film. The sci-fi genre, on the other hand, has different conventions, such as the usage of futuristic technology within the production to connote to the audience that they are in a future world, which is seen in the film Star Trek Into Darkness through the means of the laser guns and many other props, where we also see featuring of aliens from faraway planets such as the Klingons. Sci-fi also features a great deal of space and time travel to add to the futuristic overview to the film, and also adding to the drama of the film. After determining the conventions for my genre, I then had to make the decision whether or not to subvert or to conform to the conventions of each film. I conformed to a great deal more action conventions, as I wanted it to be more action-based film rather than sci-fi film, which would have been difficult to produce due to the lack of funding. Another reason is that I wanted it to be a typical convention action film that I knew my target audience would enjoy. I chose to include the conventions of having a main protagonist who is less aesthetically pleasing in comparison to the protagonist, who is typically good looking in comparison. This came in the form of a young boy portraying the protagonist and the main boss portraying the role of an antagonist. I followed this convention as it allowed to form two sides of the film, good and evil, so that the audience can prize with a side. I also conformed to the convention of featuring both a mixture of weaponry and chase scenes to ensure that the audience is glued to their seats throughout the 5 minutes. Within my short film, there are several chase scenes shot in a variety of locations, along with the use of weaponry as the plot begins to climax at the industrial estate. Finally, I conformed to the convention of having a spectacular location featuring within the film. In my case, it was the usage of Spain as a location. This adds to the professionalism of the production, as it gives the idea I have a big budget. As for the sci-fi genre, I only conform to the idea of the usage of a futuristic device. In this case, it is a watch that allows my protagonist to jump to other locations. I like this as it contrasted with some of the action features to make the hybrid genre of the two. As for my short film conventions, my short film conforms to the majority. It is only 5 minutes 10 seconds in length, a simple plot to ensure that the audience can easily comprehend it, which is reinforced by me only having 3 characters throughout the whole film. Along with conforming to conventions, I also developed and challenged conventions that would allow my film to stand out due to it being different to the usual action films. One of the main conventions of a short film is the idea of a simple location that would be cheap to shoot at. However, I chose to shoot a short proportion of my film in the sunny destination of Spain. Having this extravagant location allowed my short film to stand out against the rest due to the majority of short films having a small budget that would not enable them to shoot in such tropical locations. I also challenged conventions in the form of leaving the ending of my film open, with my ending being the watch on the bed of the sea to which anyone could access it and use its powers. This challenges short film conventions as typically there aren't ever sequels to short films due to the small budget that would restrict them from producing more. I also challenged the conventions of action films. Many action films such as The Bourne, Identity have a complex plot that keeps the audience asking questions, whereas my storyline is simple. This is due to the time constraints that restrict the amount of depth I can go into. This is in combination with the fact that a more extravagant plot could lead to a larger budget. Upon the creation of my short film, I used one specific theory of films to aid the creation of my storyline, Todorov's narrative theory. The theory states that there are 5 main stages to a film plot. These are a state of equilibrium, a disruption of that order by an event, a recognition that the disorder has occurred, 4. An attempt to repair the damage of the disruption, and 5. A return or restoration of a new equilibrium. I adopted the theory for my short film as I felt it would be beneficial for my plot, that it would follow this simple structure. Along with the Todorov's narrative theory, I also feature a great deal of enigma codes that make the audience question what they are watching, which then in itself keeps the audience on the edge of their seat whilst watching. One of the enigma codes I featured was the reasoning for why the antagonists want the watch so badly, to which the question is answered around halfway through the film, at which point the question is replaced with a new enigma code, which is, will he survive the chase? To which we discover he will, but only right at the end. This adds to the drama as the audience have to hold out to discover the answer. Finally, I leave the audience with an enigma code. What will happen to the watch? This question is not answered, making the audience want to watch even more. Along with the conventions of short films, there are also conventions of film posters and film reviews. For my film poster, I conform to a great deal of the conventions, to include the primary characters within the foreground to help aid the audience in determining who is in the film. This convention features in films such as Star Trek Into Darkness. Also, the inclusion of a setting seen in the film as the background to it also gives an insight into where the film is set. This is further reinforced through the means of props, which give a sense of what the film will be like. For mine, I use guns to suggest a violent film. I also included typical features such as a billing block, character names and release dates, all of which are featured in conventional film posters, to give it a professional look, whilst aiding the audience in understanding the plot. The same occurred when doing the film review, with the exception I then had to follow the conventions of a language within the review from the Empire magazine. The conventions of Empire's language are to have a mixture of both humour and seriousness, which gives a happy medium which all readers would enjoy.